Welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello, and today we've got Oscar Chavez on the show. Oscar, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Great to have you. Excited to have you on the show today. And gosh, I'm trying to see all the books you got there behind you. You got quite the library and quite the awards stacked up. Good stuff.
Yeah, thank you very much. One of my mentors said, "Don't wait too long before you start a library." And I remember always just wanting a library. I wanted a room full of books, and I'm probably only a tenth of the room size I want to get to in books. But what I don't want to do is get so far into building a library that I don't read any of the books. I kind of want to get through most of these books. I'm probably through about 80% of these books, but I've just found such a wonderful experience in learning from different mentors and people that have been through different things. I think the thing we need to realize, Chris, is that anything that we're going through in business, or any hardship, or anything that we're struggling with, or anything that we need a point in the right direction, typically there's someone that's already written a book about the topic. So why not read that book and see if we can get ourselves through whatever problem, whatever symptom, whatever challenge that we may be having is generally found in a book. So that's why I take solace in reading a lot of books, Chris.
Yeah, there's so much value in books, and it blows my mind consistently. Sometimes people are like, oh, that book's $20 or $25. Like, this was written by a multimillionaire. I mean, why would you not want to pay $25 for access to something that person has spent their whole life figuring out and now writing a book about? It seems so funny to me when people feel like a price tag is too much on a book where there's so much knowledge in there. And also, I'd like to point out the nugget that you shared there, how you don't want to just fill it up with a bunch of books. You're trying to read as you go and then add to the bookshelf. So I love that as well. Too many people, they order all the books, they never read it, and the knowledge is stuck there in the books because they refuse to read it. And there's a quote that I saw that said, the person who refuses to read has no advantage over the person who cannot read. That really stood out to me as well.
Yes, absolutely. I love that quote.
But Oscar, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for our audience? Who is Oscar? Tell us about where you got your start, what you're up to today. Feel free, take it away. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Chris. So my name is Oscar Chavez. I have been coined as the world's #1 CEO advisor. And I've been on the cover of a number of different magazines. I've gone around the world speaking. And the only reason I say that is because I love to show people the polarity of my life. I came to Australia as a refugee. I was 2 years old. We were less than broke. I mean, we had such civil war in El
Negative, yeah.
Salvador, and we had to come all over the world to a country that we didn't even know what it was, apart from a pile of dirt. And the community and the government just embraced us as refugees. So I always grew up not even understanding that that was an issue, because my parents showered me with so much love, so much attention, so much belief in myself that I could achieve anything. So I just grew up with that notion of really just not even knowing that there was a problem. Until later on, I heard about my dad's story and the government coming after him to execute him, and we had to flee the country. And it was at that moment that I realized that, you know what, if it wasn't for that set of circumstance in my life, I wouldn't be here today. I'd probably be dead, or I'd probably be doing something less than ideal on the streets. I might have ended up in a criminal gang, might have ended up selling drugs. Like, that could have been my destiny, right? These are the things that go through my mind. And so the reason that I say those things is because sometimes I come across CEOs that have a limiting belief. They think that nobody would be interested in their story. They're not willing to shout to the press and to the media about all the amazing things that they do for their clients. And they live a life that is not fulfilling their potential. And I like to talk about this idea of destiny. I used to hate the word destiny, Chris, until I realized that there's a difference between fate and destiny. Fate is a predetermined path, that it doesn't matter what happens in between, you will get to that predetermined path. So I don't like that word fate. But
Right.
destiny is completely dependent on our choices. And every choice that we make unfolds our destiny in a different way. So the reason that I tell that story is because I really want people to understand that their destiny is before them, and the choices that they make from here until then will absolutely determine the results of their life. So I guess that's a little bit about me, Chris.
That's amazing. That's an amazing
I
story.
will
I
add. I
mean,
will add. I'll add a little shout out. So I'm the chairman of a company called The Boardroom, and
okay.
collectively over 17.5 billion in mergers and acquisitions. We've also done 50 rapid turnarounds. So that's companies on the brink of financial despair, investors are losing interest, they're withdrawing funds, people are starting to leave, the leadership loses faith in the leader, there's potentially a hostile takeover taking place, there's a lot of disruption. And so at that point, that's where they'll call us. And we've been able to do 50 of those, and represented by Marco Robert, who's one of our chairs as well, 50 turnarounds with a 0% failure rate. So we're very proud of that number. So that's a little shout out to the boardroom there, Chris.
Very cool, very cool. So, what is it that you're looking for? Are you looking to partner up or acquire these companies and turn them around that fit a certain, set of rules, or is it a certain type of business? I'd love to dive into that a little bit more because that's quite a track record.
Yeah, for sure. So for us, it can be a look at equity, because what we find is that the founding team doesn't know what they don't know. And if you look at innovation through the giants, the greats that have occurred, innovation always comes from an industry which you may not expect it to come through. So if you look at Uber, for instance, they weren't from the taxi industry. They completely took an industry and revolutionized it. Why? Because they rethought the customer journey in a different way. So when you put 5 people together that really understand the customer journey from scale, from startup to exit, and I'm talking about some companies have 100 exit. So whatever their revenue is, let's say that they're bringing in $1 million of revenue, now their company valuation is worth $100 million, even though they've only got $100 million of revenue. So for us, we look for high growth companies. We look for companies that are looking to expand internationally. We look for tech companies. We look for companies that are doing something unique, that are revolutionizing the game. We look typically for companies that really aspire to be 1 or 2 in their industry. We look for companies that have a solid board. And then they also need an advisory board. So that your board is the board of directors is your fiduciary board, the ones with legal obligation. Then you have the advisory board, which is the external. We always like to say that you can't read a box from within the box. You need people outside to be able to tell you what's going on within the dynamic of your business. So there are a couple of things that we look for. And if companies are out there going, you know what, I really want to scale. I really want a higher multiplier. I don't want my company to be worth 1x revenue, because I can probably get more than that on the stock market. So why would I even invest in my company? If they want to increase their multipliers, if they go through what I just mentioned and take a little graph and start ticking where they tick those boxes, then they can see what they need to do next in order to really start boosting the valuations of their companies. And there's a lot more to it, but that's at a very high level, Chris.
I love that. I have so many friends that, they have a business or something, and their long-term vision is to either be an angel investor or, some sort of investor in a startup, or maybe even help acquire and turn around companies, flip businesses essentially. So, how did you even get into this? What sparked your attention? Did you also have that entrepreneurial love for helping startup founders really scale their businesses?
Yeah, so I've for me, it was a bit of a journey. I think the first thing that was really important to me was really identifying my strengths and weaknesses as a human being. What is it that I love doing? What is it that sets me on fire? And what is it that I could do all day and have more energy at the end of the day? One of my mentors, Dr. John DeMartini, taught me this. What can I be doing in my life that at the end of the day I would have more energy than when I started? And I started this whole introspective journey of what do I like to do? What do I love? Who am I as a person? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And I did a number of different personality studies. I did the Clifton Strengths, I did the MBTI, I did the DISC profiling, I did the Big Five personality, and I also did one called the Objective Personality Type. Now that's run by a wonderful couple in the US. And every other personality type test that you do is based on a subjective view of oneself, meaning that I am biased towards myself, and the answers that I give you will be determined by my interpretation of my own self. Mm-hmm. But as you know, Chris, oftentimes our own interpretation of our own self is actually wrong. And so I went through this process of getting an objective personality study, and they said to me, you've got 2 functions that you love to do more than anything else, and those functions are called blast, play. The other 2 are called sleep and consume. So people that kind of talk monotonous and they're kind of a bit slow, that's like high sleep energy.
Yep.
People that are like really book savvy and they care about the technology, they care about the detail, that's like high and consume. With blast. It's people like me who just love to talk, love to tell everybody all the stuff that they've been learning, and just they can't get away from teaching, or they can't get away from talking, or they can't get away from leading. That's like high blast. And then play is the people that kind of are really inquisitive because they're asking a lot of questions. It's like, instead of me researching something to figure out how I do it, I'm going to call you on the phone, Chris. I'm going to say, I'm having this challenge. What do you think about it? And I'm going to listen. So firstly, it's about identifying what is it that I'm really strong at. What are the things that I need to press on in my life in order to get the highest value, highest intent return? So that was the first thing. It was a level of self-awareness. That was the first thing. The second thing then that I heard was that, because I've always been in sales. I mean, my whole life has been full of multi-million dollar transactions, working with multi-billion dollar brands. And so I've been playing at that level, and I make a difference, right? I make a difference. Whenever I see problems within an organization, I can find a way to solve that challenge. And usually it's a breakdown in communication, or maybe the people aren't really prepared for the task, so therefore they don't quite know what direction they're walking in, or maybe one hand isn't talking to the other. And my whole life has been full of these situations where I deal with very large, complex issues. And I've always been selling technology, Chris. That's always what I've been doing. I've been selling technology, multi-million dollar deals to banks. It's what I do.
Yeah.
And then I heard someone say, well, great, you could be great at sales, but the hardest thing you'll ever do is to sell a company. And I thought, back in the old days, I'm talking 15 years ago, when I was building applications and I'd hire developers and I'd have these great ideas, I'd get to the point where I'd build a product. I'd probably spend maybe $100,000, Chris, on building this product. And then I'd go, okay, how do I get customers? How do I get investors? So then I'd build my pitch decks. I'd go out to investors. And by the second investment pitch, I was bored already. I'd shut down the business. I go, you know what? I just don't care about this. And I go do something else. And my life was full of these situations in life where I'd have this great idea. I'd be so motivated by that idea, Chris, that I would just be obsessed with getting that thing out into the world. And then I'd get it maybe 80% there, and I go, yeah, I'm bored now. I'm done. I want to go focus on something else. So my personality is I've got a very limited attention span. And so it's through that process of realizing, hey, there's a real challenge here, which is selling a company. It's the hardest thing you could do. If I could master that skill, imagine who I could become. Imagine the type of potential and the type of destiny that I can unfold if I could learn that skill. And then I found that the third thing, Chris, so that's the second. So first thing is all about personal development and awareness of oneself. Yep. The second thing was finding a really big, hairy challenge, a vision, something that can inspire you, something that can motivate you to spend your life on. That's the second thing. And then the third thing, the most important thing, was a mentor. Because, and that's where I met Sissy Ma. She's now on the boardroom, 17.5 billion in mergers and acquisitions. And so I go and do deals. I go and find companies, and they need investors. And I just go back to Sissy and I say, okay, Sissy, let's look through this pitch deck together. What do you see? And she's telling me all these incredible things that I would never see on my own without the eyes of someone with experience. And so I'll listen to her, and I'll go back to my client and say, okay, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to fix up. Can you work on that for me? All good. They the deck. I go back to Sissy. I say, hey, Sissy, how's this looking so far? And she's like, yeah, good. You need to change this. That's wrong with that pitch deck. That's not positioned in a certain way. I go back to the, and then I go back to the client. And I become this intermediary where I can bring in the investor. I can pitch the company on behalf of the CEO. Because let's face it, Chris, a lot of the CEOs that have really high growth companies are very technical, and they're not good at pitching because they're so involved in the detail. Nobody cares about the detail. They want the result. They want the dream. They want the end state. They want the vision. They want the result. But a lot of technical founders just go into these rabbit holes and bore people to death. And so it's through that process, let's call it 3 steps, of identifying your own strengths and weaknesses. The second thing was now I'm having a mind blank.
I wrote down some things here and there, but I didn't write them in order.
Yeah, okay. So look, the second thing was finding a big meaty challenge.
Yep.
And then the third thing was finding a mentor.
Right.
So it's through that process, Chris, that I ended up pursuing this path and following this this
I love that. I mean, that's really the steps for success, no matter what it is. I mean, finding a big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG, as I forget which book mentions that, but then finding the mentor it's enabling you to see the things, like you said, that you would not have seen. You would not have noticed those things. You're both looking at the same piece of paper, but your mentor was able to see it in a way that maybe you had not had the experience to see just yet. And the other thing that I really wanted to point out there that I love is that you mentioned you love a challenge, you love starting things, then you get kind of bored with it. A lot of us do tend to feel that way, entrepreneurs, right? Shiny object syndrome. And I think they talk about this in Traction, having the integrator to actually do the tasks, carry everything out, because it seems like you sound more like the visionary, where you're coming up with all these amazing ideas. You got the teams in place, they're going out and they're running with the play so that you can move on to that next business to help to identify the opportunities, right? So finding the people who can actually take your vision and run with it, that's also a very big component to the success that you've been seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to step one in that, that I gave you the horizontal view. There's a vertical view there, which is in step one, where you really identify your strengths and weaknesses. And this takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of labor. It takes a lot of introspection, and actually takes a lot of tears as well, because you might find a lot of insecurities, a lot of false motivations. And I could tell you a story about that in a moment. But to finish on that thought, what I want to do is play blast the whole time. I want to meet investors. I want to meet about pitch decks. I'm just in meetings all the time, back to back, just meeting with new people, getting things done. But if I didn't have the team, like next to me, side by side, pulling things forward, I would never achieve anything. Nothing would ever get done, because I know that I have shiny object syndrome, in the positive way, in that I'm a visionary. So I'm not going to go and change my personality just because somebody says don't get shiny object syndrome. What I want to do is be able to see the shiny object and focus on that until the vision of what I need that for, until it's fully served its use. So I'll see a shiny object, I'll see a strategy, but I need to focus on that until it gets done. But once it's done, the challenge that most CEOs have is they get then caught in the work. They do the work. That's the wrong place to be in your business. You've got to be above the business. You've got to see the shiny object. You've got to build a strategy to manage that. I like to call it the goose that lays the golden eggs. A lot of CEOs think about their business as a goose that lays golden eggs, but they want to sell their goose that lays golden eggs. Why wouldn't you instead have someone manage the goose, the golden egg, go and find another goose that lays golden eggs? That's really the strategy conceptually that I implement into my life, Chris, because I think it's really important to have really solid teams that can help you achieve those outcomes. And like you said, if I didn't have a COO in my business that could manage everything, all the chaos that I bring, because I make it rain in chaos, Chris, I make it rain. And so I need someone to help stabilize all this. Otherwise, it's a disaster.
Yeah, so a team is extremely important, right? Surrounding yourself with the right people. And I love how your talent is finding that shiny object, because a lot of times we hear about it in a negative sense of like people get shiny object syndrome, squirrel syndrome, they can't focus, they never get anything done. But your skill is identifying those opportunities. You see the little glint of, or the shimmer of gold, you find the opportunity, you get your team on it, and they take the ball and they run it to the end zone, just to use like a sports or football, example here or analogy. And then you go find the next opportunity. So that is a talent, because a lot of times the opportunity is staring us in the face, but we're not really conditioned to look for it. So we may not even realize that it's an opportunity, whereas you're able to spot it and say, hold on a second, I think there's something here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's amazing. So how's 2020 looking, or 2022? Now I'm like forgetting my years. It feels like it's still 2020 in a way. But how is 2022 looking for you and your company? Since there's so many different companies that you're involved in, how do you go about goal setting? Is it all company specific based on the industries? I'd love to hear a little bit about that if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, for sure. So 2022, what an interesting time for a lot of people. It's about taking, I love Jim Rohn, one of the most amazing personal development mentors. One of the things that's always stuck with me in life is that he said is, don't begin a year before it's finished on paper. Don't finish a quarter before it's finished on paper. Don't finish a month until it's finished on paper. Don't begin a day until it's finished on paper. And so that's really taught me that it's always important. It's mandatory to go back and plan. Now, what happens as you go throughout the year is that as an entrepreneur, you're bringing more and more ideas to the table, more strategies, more more bets that you're making, because everything's a test, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've got PR to focus on, you've got marketing, you've got salespeople, you've got inside sales, you've got various different strategies, you've got mergers and acquisitions going on, you've got various different investors at the table per company. So what ends up happening through the year as you try to execute your strategy is that you bring a lot of stuff to the table. And all of that stuff's really important. All of it is really important. I mean, if you have 3 different lead gen strategies going on, or 4 different lead gen strategies, they're probably all important. Are they all working? That's the question. And so as you get to the end of the year, you kind of need to take a moment to step back and go, okay, what are all the things that I'm doing with my life? And write every single one of those things down in terms of major projects. And then ask yourself the question, is this working in the way that I need it to work? Is this producing the results that I need in my life? And if it's not producing the results, one of the things I recommend to do is and this, I was even doing this yesterday. I've got a huge problem on my hands, huge problem, and that's life, right? The more money that you can attract more money based on the size of the problem that you solve. And so I've always got huge problems on my table right in front of me. So even yesterday, just to give you a real example, all this stuff's going on in my head. The worst place for stuff to go on is inside your head. So I took an Asana task, and I wrote down 20, even though our 2022 plan is done, this is now a plan to solve a very particular problem within my entire strategy. This is like a mission within my overall strategy. So I've got a challenge with one of the missions that we're running. And so I thought, okay, the worst place for this to be is inside my head, and the worst place for it to be is for me to talk to someone about it, because that's where your strengths can become weaknesses, is where you don't buffer those with making your weaknesses a little bit more effective. You can't allow your weaknesses to take over your life, because then you'll get hit by a tidal wave, because your weaknesses will just overwhelm your strengths. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing about life, Chris. And so what I did is decided that I'm not going to talk to it. I'm not going to use my play function. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to shut up. I'm going to start writing down what is the problem. So I started writing down the problem. And then I wrote down, well, what are the aspects of the problem? What are the multiple different prongs that this problem has? How does it manifest? And then the third thing that I did was possible solutions. And I'm writing down, I've got now 5 or 6 different possible solutions. And all of those solutions lead me to, I need more research. I need to go back out and I need to find more information that's going to help me make the right decision. Because this single decision alone can cost me $4 million.
Yeah.
This one decision that I make is going to cost me $4 million. If I make the decision incorrectly, it's going to cost me a lot of money, Chris. So I'm going to slow down, and I'm going to be very careful with how I solve that problem. And I'm going to make sure that the solution, it is the right solution. Because if we go in the wrong path, it's going to be detrimental to our results. You know, we may need to fire people. We might need to shut divisions down. And so we need to be very careful with how we actually plan and how we solve these problems. And because I'm involved in a lot of different companies, Chris, and advise and mentor and these kinds of things, you know, I have planning strategy documents that people execute for me, and I help them go through their plan. And I sit down with their plan as an advisor, and them as a CEO, they bring me their plan and go, okay, this is what I'm going to do in the next financial year. And I'll help them see what's missing. Well, your plan's weak in terms of metrics. Like, you don't have any solid KPIs for your people that are actually going to be a combination of not just leading indicators like revenue, but also lagging indicators like how many phone calls booked, how many leads did the company produce, all these sorts of things. So it's about having, like you said, like a mentor that can go through the planning. I go through a very regimented planning process to make sure that I don't skip a beat in 2022, so that I know that I will get the results that I need in 2022.
I love that. And you put pen to paper, you really brainstorm all the different things, because I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with, is we think of the big goal, the big vision, what's the final step or the outcome that we're picturing, and then there's a million little things in between that have to happen to get from where we are to where we want to go, and people kind of freak out. They're like, I don't know how to get there, I'm not sure how to bridge the gap, who needs to do what, and you're kind of doing this at even a greater scale, because it's not that you're just looking at one company with different divisions, you're looking at multiple companies, and so you're helping them see, like your mentor did for you, what the CEOs may not be seeing, right? Hey, you're not measuring this, that's a very important aspect of the business, for example, let's add that into the KPIs. So I love hearing this perspective of it, because usually we're hearing from, someone about their single business. And here with you, Oscar, we're hearing about multiple businesses. So it's kind of like a step above in a way, where you're managing the managers that manage the managers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you another example because that's my particular process. But what I'm doing right now, I'm doing exactly the same thing for a $40 billion company, right? And there's multiple stakeholders. There's 10 different stakeholders. There's 7 or 8 different projects. These projects could generate another $500 million for the company. So it's a very important project. And what we need to do is go through, okay, what is it that, go through the fact base. The most important thing for every decision is a fact base, a solid fact base. So we go through all the facts. What are the products? What are the pros? What are the cons? Who's responsible for those products? Where are we in the product life cycle? These products that we want to focus on. So we go through each of those products one by one, and we start documenting and getting our fact base down together. Where are we at? In terms of also, what's the estimated size of the value of that project? And also, what's the not just the size, but how quickly can that project turn revenue on? Because if you're always going for things that in 12 months, 24 months are going to generate revenue, you may not make it to cross that bridge to bring in that revenue at the end of the day. So you've got to be very careful, Chris, that we go through the process of making sure that we identify short-term milestones as well as long-term milestones. So after we get our fact base down, then we go through the process of going, okay, what are we going to focus on for the next 4 quarters? And what you want to have, or what you want to develop, is a plan where you can go back to that plan after the first month and go, how are we tracking to that plan? You want to go back after the first quarter and say, did we do what we said we're going to do? And this is one of the biggest issues in all companies that I see, is the lack of accountability. It's the lack of accountability. It's the lack of saying, this is what I'm going to do, and then that person achieves it. And so accountability is one of the hallmarks of success. It's one of the things that every person needs to implement in their business, is accountability. So we've created the structure for this $40 billion company that we would, in essence, hold everybody accountable to this plan. We would all develop the plan together. It's functional. You're moving sticky notes around, and it becomes then a shared plan. If I come along and go, here's the plan, because it's not my company, nobody will buy into it. So I have to get them to buy into their own plan. In my company, it's my plan, and people will buy into it because they believe in me. They believe in me as an individual, and they believe in my ability to get results. When it's someone else's company, I can't do that. Nor do I have the time, to be quite frank, to go around and manage everybody and making sure they do what they say they're going to do. So this is the strategy that I use. So let's say you're an entrepreneur now and you want to promote a CEO within a business. That's potentially what you could do as a CEO to get your, as an entrepreneur, sorry, so that your CEO, your CFO, your CTO, your CISO, whatever you have, can get there and have a unified plan that they can all work towards. Because otherwise what happens is that everybody walks in their own direction. There's silos in the business, that always happens, and everybody walks in their own silos, and we don't get the congruence, the synergy of the collective. The sum of the parts is not greater than the whole. And you can't afford to have that in business, Chris. We have to ensure that each of the components contributes more than one when you put it next to the rest of them. So in synergy of, like I said, 100xing your company valuation, that's huge synergy. You're getting 100x synergy. In some companies, it's like a 10x synergy or a 2x synergy or a 1x synergy. So focusing on these things in planning make a huge difference. And I think it's the appropriate time for it as we come towards the end of the year and people are going, well, what's 2022 going to look like? What's my destiny for 2022? Well, hey, that depends on your choices. And if you're watching this, it's important to note that I always say that the amount of books on the shelf or the amount of information in the world doesn't mean jack squat until we can implement those things. So what I would recommend for people that are watching this is to actually try to implement everything that I've said and watch the results unfold in their life, and it will be astronomical growth. I guarantee it.
I love that, Oscar. I do have a question, because just thinking at that bigger corporate, level, when you're managing all these companies and you're telling people how to adjust their goals for the coming year and what metrics they need to track, whenever they're reviewing their progress from the previous quarter, are they level setting? Are they adjusting their goals, or are they keeping the goals for the entire year, saying, well, we fell short of that first goal, but here's the things we're going to do to fix it in the next quarter? I'm just curious to hear, does the goal ever get adjusted during the year, or do you just stick to it come hell or high water?
It depends how the goal has been set, Chris. I think if a lot of goals are set within organizations that are based on gut feels, intuition, heuristic, that may not actually be the most beneficial goals for the company. And the goal that they've set up has set the company up to fail. Now, one of the companies that I deal in, I had a look through their goals, and I went back to them simply and said, that goal is unattainable in your current state. Your organization, there's zero chance your organization will be able to hit that goal. And so even if this is in a turnaround situation, the company's been going backwards for a number of years, then you go and set a huge goal for the company. And then I said, even if the company stops the bleeding and grows by 5%, which is a very small amount of growth, everybody's still going to feel like an epic failure. Everybody's still going to feel crap because you've set this unrealistic goal that is 15% growth after a couple of years of going backwards. Mm-hmm. It's unreasonable. Maybe your first goal should even be, let's try to stay where we are. Let's try that as a goal. Now you obviously need your BHAG. You need your big, hairy, audacious goal. Like what do you really, now that we've documented these things and we're going to build these into a plan and we're going to measure that plan every month and we're going to check the performance of the plan every month, every week. Let's have something that we all kind of verbally commit to that we're going to try to achieve. And in that company, it was to double the company. We're going to try to double the company in that year. Even though from a forecast perspective, we said we're going to do 5%. So we locked that in. We did a revenue plan 12 months in advance. And so at the first month, you have 11 months to go and you see what you should be tracking each month. Well, you said you were going to grow this month, now you're behind. You said you were going to grow this, you're behind. So the plan shouldn't be adjusted if it's set properly. The plan should remain the plan, and the plan should not be adjusted. If the team cannot perform, the plan should not change. And it's a symptom of, well, there's something wrong. We need to do something differently. Maybe we've got the wrong team members. Maybe the company strategy is wrong. Maybe we're over-investing in certain areas. Maybe we're under-investing in other areas. So it goes back down to the P&L. What are we investing in? Where are we betting? We're betting on all these things as an organization. Is that where we should be betting, or should we change our bet and place it somewhere else? In companies where they've set stupid goals, then yeah, you've got to do an adjustment, because what you can't have is your people walking around like zombies, feeling like crap, pretending that they're compliant and giving you a nod and saying, yeah, I'm going to work on that, and they're not doing it. Mm-hmm. You need an organization where people are really involved, where they're inspired to do their best work, where they want to come to work every day, where they love the relationships that they're building in that workplace, where they see a vision of themselves in the future by working with your company. It's called enlightened self-interest. When the individual can see a better version of themselves within the organization, they would have no reason to leave. And so if the goals are set properly, we can harness that enlightened self-interest where people go, you know what, I can earn good money here. I can develop a career. I can go to the next level. Because we're either growing or dying. And so if we provide environments where people grow, they will continue to grow. If we provide environments where people still grow, but they feel like a failure, that's still not growth. That's still death. And so we need to be very careful with our goals, that we set realistic goals. But then we also set the big, hairy, audacious goal that we're really going after because we believe in that strategy, we believe in that vision. And now we have a strategy to double our company, triple our company, 10x our company. That's where people need to be thinking. But to the open, like let's say you're a publicly listed company, you don't want to be telling the market that you're going to 10x your company and then you deliver 50% growth or 100% growth, because they're going to go, well, you lied to me and I'm going to stop investing in you. So you have to be very careful with how you balance these polarities in life and in business.
Yeah, there's so much to consider there. And I wrote this down. I love what you just said about enlightened self-interest. That is the challenge of actually motivating and inspiring people to want to show up and give it their all. And I even find in my own business, I sometimes struggle with this of when I wake up of, how do I motivate myself to do all this stuff that I said I was going to do, right? So I think that's something that resonates with a lot of people listening right now of how do you create that environment? How do you create the core values, the mission statement, the goals that sound fun and challenging, but not so ridiculously impossibly challenging that no one wants to even try? Is there a formula to that, or have you seen anything from your experience here that could help somebody dial those in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two elements of that to consider. The first thing is that we need solid accountability. We need people to work hard, and we need people to give more than 100% because everybody has more than 100% within them, right? They have this untapped potential where their 100% could be worth 500% to your organization. If that person was on fire, your organization could grow. If they weren't doing a half-assed job, the organization would grow. And so we need solid accountability in place. That oftentimes will create friction, and friction is not always good, but sometimes friction is healthy in business where you need the friction. It's like a cog in a wheel. Without if the two cogs weren't touching each other and creating friction, they wouldn't move. So it's the same in business. You need moving. In terms of getting people to see that enlightened self-interest, the reality of that is that it comes down to a concept I love to, and there's many different words for it, but I'm going to talk about Mark Goulston. Mark Goulston, we spent some time together, and he was on Oprah, so Oprah actually interviewed him, and he taught me about this concept called surgical empathy. Now, he was an ex-FBI negotiator, hostage negotiator, and he would train the elite, the best of the best, but he spent a lot of his time in clinical psychology dealing with people that wanted to commit suicide. And one of the things that was really powerful about his practice is when somebody was in a really rough state and they're talking about their insecurities, their fears, their doubts, their concerns, their lack of desire to live, he would simply just be there for them. He would look into their eyes and just be there with them and say, that must have, I can imagine why you feel the way you feel. And if I was in your shoes, I'd also want to take my life. And it's that moment where empathy, and I love this description for empathy, empathy is connecting to the underlying emotion of the experience. So sometimes when people give us experiences, we don't connect with the emotion under the experience. When you're in a leadership position, it's not good enough to just use apathy or just to talk. You have to have surgical empathy, which means I'm going to sit with my people. I'm going to know what drives them. I'm going to know what inspires them. I'm going to know what they hate about their job. I'm going to know what they think about their peers. I'm going to know where they think the deficiencies are in the company. I'm going to know that, or actually they're going to know that to communicate with me in a confidential fashion. They're going to know that I have their back come hell or high water. They're going to know that I'm going to put them above any performance metric and that I deeply, passionately care about them and respect them as a human being. So if you're in a leadership position, we have to press that time with the people one-on-one, making them feel that we actually care. Now, you can't do that unless you actually care. And that's why, number
Right.
one, personal development was so important, right? Because you can't just sit there and pretend that you care. You actually have to care about your people. And the only way to do that is to do your own self-discovery, lay down the ego, and approach the world in a way that allows you to be a vessel for other people's transformations. I went through the process, Chris, of going through this whole, what is it that I love? What is it that's my vision? Because I put a lot of visions together for a lot of different companies and a lot of different missions. And sometimes when it comes to my own stuff, sometimes I even neglect it because I'm so busy working on other people's stuff. And I came to this notion for me personally, something I felt deeply passionate about, was I want to, and I hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyway, I want to be a source of healing for people's lives and for people's businesses. And I don't really like that word because it's a lot of woo-woo and a lot of, just strange stuff. But I've experienced it firsthand where people will come to me and they've had some really bad situations happen in their company. Maybe in the situation that I'm talking about, the other co-founder has backstabbed them and is trying to force them to shut down the company, right? Because they had a 50-50 partnership. And the other founder becomes so hard to deal with that now the company needs to shut down. And I've been here in front of another human being that's telling me this story. And she's like, how did you deal with that emotionally? And I go back to business because I'm very, I'm business. Let's get into business. Here's what you should have done differently. Here's how you can solve the situation. Here's how I'd negotiate out of the situation. And she kind of looks at me and she says, yeah, but how do you deal with the emotions of it?
Right.
And then I realized, I was like, she's hurting. she's really, really hurting. I didn't even see that. I was kind of like, hey, this is how you get out of the negotiation. This is how you can drive yourself to success.
Yeah.
We're not ready for success until we've dealt with the emotional challenge. So she's sitting there, and I remember just leaning forward, and I said to her, what you're going through is no different than it's in essence, it's called it's called a psychological death. It's where part of you lays down to die. And it's no different than having a dog die or a cat die or something that you deeply care about. Right now, we just need to acknowledge that you are going through a lot of hurt. And it's going to hurt like hell because a part of you that existed, a certain set of belief systems has died. And you need to allow yourself the mourning. Don't pretend that it doesn't exist. Face it. Acknowledge that it hurts. It hurts, but guess what? It's part of the growth process. It's like you're a garden and life gives you manure and it's smelly and it's stinky, but they're the ingredients, they're the nutrients for your growth. And she just tears. I've never seen another adult cry so much in her life. Just tears, right? We're just going. And at that moment I realized, okay, my mission is to help heal people's businesses and people's lives. Because sometimes they just need someone to listen and someone to have empathy. So to answer your question very, very broadly, leadership is about empathy. And we can't have empathy until we settle our ego and become truly selfless towards the other human beings.
I love that. That was such a great answer. And coincidentally, I just made a post on Instagram the other day about empathy and how, admittedly, many of us, myself included, we tend to be selfish. If me and mine are taken care of, I'm like, cool. Oh, something happened on the other side of the world. Well, that sucks. It's not affecting me directly. So I hope everything goes well. It gets better. But, it's still sunny out here. I'm going to go on a jog, right? So actually having empathy, truly caring for them. I love how at first I thought you were saying you got to act like you have empathy because they have to think that you have empathy. But then you clarified and you said, to do that, you have to actually have it. You have to put yourself in their shoes. And a lot of times, I guess, us entrepreneurs, we like to be fixer-uppers, right? You started laying out the plan, do A, B, and C. This is how you could have fixed it, or you could have avoided it, or here's how to go forward, right? And you realize that, wait a second, we need to just sit here and mourn. I need to acknowledge the emotion. It's just going to take some time, right? So that was the perfect answer. I didn't know where you were going to go with it, but empathy, that hits the nail on the head.
Love it.
Gosh, so what's some of the biggest challenges that you've seen so far? Whenever you come across these businesses, is it a certain business or maybe a co-founder or a CEO that you got to deal with who's not really seeing things the same way, eye to eye?
Yeah, for me, it's, and I sometimes I kind of don't know how to deal with it, but it is blind spots, right? It is. Like I'll give you an example. The other week we had an event, and I put someone. We do this thing where we put someone on a hot seat and we have a rapid transformation right there, right?
Okay.
We transform someone's life, and we go through the process of asking the questions, identifying, understanding what's going on, and I got down to the root cause. And when I get down to the root cause, then I can pretty much rip it out from where it is. So we go through that process, I identify the root cause issue, I make an attempt to rip it out. I even show everybody, I'm like, hey, look how deep these roots were. And I get people to agree that let me give you the real tangible example. I said, you have a confidence issue, my friend. You have a confidence issue. If you solve that confidence issue, you're going to stop talking about the fact that your revenue is poor. You're going to stop talking about the fact that you can't get meetings. So if you look at my calendar, every single day, I'm meeting with really high-profile people that can sign $200 million checks for me, right? These are the people that I'm meeting with every day. And since COVID, it's never been easier to actually meet people from all around the world. It's never been easier to grow your network. Yet this guy's saying, oh, it's really hard because of COVID and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of go, okay, you have a confidence issue. I asked him, I said, rate your confidence out of 10, good sir. He said, yeah, maybe a 6 out of 10. I knew it was like a 2 out of 10. So I said, before I come and let him know what I think, I'm going to hit back the audience. And I went back to the audience. I'm like, okay, what do you think he has? There's like 3. Well, the other guy's like, what do you think he has? And he's kind of like, and he's like, 2. And then someone else was, around that, 4 number. So then I said back to the individual in the hot seat, I said, you, my friend, I'm going to rate your confidence as really low. You have a confidence issue. So here's what you need to do. And I gave him very practical steps about what he needed to do to actually really elevate his confidence, boost his confidence to the next level. And then he comes back and goes, but I do have confidence. And I'm kind of like, come on, like objectively, based on my interpretation and based on 3 other people's interpretations, you have low confidence, and perception is reality. So why would I want to network with you? Why would I want to meet with you if I meet you face to face and you've got a 2 out of 3 confidence? You're not confident in yourself. You're not confident in your product. You're not confident in the results you can provide. Why the hell would I meet with you? Now, I didn't say it like this, right? I was much more gentle, when I was dealing with him face to face. But to answer your question, it's blind spots. It's like when you, and it's an ego problem, because when you tell a founder or an owner that they have a particular issue in their business, and they kind of make excuses and kind of say, yeah, I'm kind of doing that anyway, that defeats the whole purpose and completely destroys your growth. Completely destroys your growth. Rather than you listening and going, okay, that's now a problem I have to solve. Then you get into your highest form of creative space or creative state, which leads to the biggest impact on the world and the biggest revenue and making a difference in people's lives, when you harness your creative state. So instead of going, I acknowledge that that's a problem for me now. Thank you for calling that out. I need to go and spend some time alone on the edge of my bed and have a conversation with myself, interrogate myself, find out what's going on, what hurts, what insecurities, what have people said to me that I'm believing in, what's my self-talk like, what am I saying about myself? Instead of going back and doing the work, the response was, yeah, but I have confidence. Now that's an excuse.
Yeah.
So it's a complex answer, because it is totally ego driven, and it's totally based on that people want to keep their identity of themselves, because as soon as they lose that identity themselves, it hurts like hell. The detachment of the ego from the self is the most painful thing a human being can go through. It's like mourning your own death. It is so deep, it's so dark, it's so tragic that that's why not a lot of people go through that process of ego death, because the ego is so gripped to the body, and it becomes the self, it becomes the identity, and people associate with their ego. And as soon as somebody comes to offend that ego, whoa, does that hurt? Because the ego's responsibility is to keep us alive and to keep us safe. And it sends pain messages all around the body whenever it's hurt, whenever it's suffering, starts to tremble, starts to send messages, and starts to create tension within the body when the ego gets hurt. And so when people make excuses, it's an ego issue, and they're not doing the work to overcome the ego. They have a huge identity crisis that they don't know is around the corner, because they think they are a certain someone because of a certain set of beliefs that they hold on to. And as soon as something comes along and knocks those beliefs over, their identity will get knocked over, and they're in for a real rough time. So for me, that's a very I mean, I can talk about this for hours, but that is the kind of really, that's the toughest thing that I see with business owners, or one of the biggest challenges that I see with people, or what's getting in their way of results.
That's a great answer. And the thing about perception being reality is so true, because maybe he was, that business owner was thinking, hey, I have a 6, or at least on the scale in their head, it was a 6. But everybody else was saying, hey, it's just really a 2 or 3 most likely. And like you mentioned, why the hell would I want to do business with that person? Or why would I take this meeting? They clearly aren't confident in themselves, in their products, in what they have to offer. It must not be as valuable. So there's a little bit of the ego hit, right? We got to I wrote that down. Detachment of ego is painful. It's something that we have to work on, not getting caught up in this identity or this vision that we have of ourselves, and being coachable. That's a word that I've heard before. If you're not coachable, if you're not willing to take feedback and to make improvements, then no one can really help you, because no advice that's given to you, you're not going to take any of it, right?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that one wholeheartedly.
Well, Oscar, we've talked about so many amazing things today. Is there any question that I should have asked you, or anything else that you'd like to add to the conversation before we let people know where to find you?
I might add just something that I often talk about, because I think it's important for people to really understand. It's a process I call the Bajo. I call it the Bajo method, or the Bajo process. But quite simply, it stands for BAHO, which is beliefs, actions, habits, outcomes. That's a reverse engineering methodology you can use to have a look at the outcomes in your life. So it could be, what's my relationship like? What's my bank account balance like? What's my health situation? Whatever it might be. And we can have a look at the outcomes in our lives, and we can reverse engineer those through the Bajo process back to what are the core beliefs we have. So if we go beliefs create actions, and actions create and consistent actions create habits, and habits create outcomes. Really important. There's books there. There's Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, Brendan Burchard, High Performance Habits. I mean, habits are really important for entrepreneurs to develop, which then leads to your outcomes in life, right? But the process that nobody talks about is what happens behind the habits. It's the beliefs, it's the actions, it's the habits, it's the outcomes. And Dr. Mark Goldstein, who I talked about before, I ran him through the Bajo method, and we talked the next week. And he said, yeah, I implemented the Bajo method because when I got up in the morning, I said to myself, I feel like I think the word he used was, I feel like an elephant. I'm always drained in the morning. I'm not a morning person. So his beliefs were, I'm not a morning person, I'm not a morning person, I'm not a morning person. He said he shifted that language to, I am a morning person. I feel radiant in the morning. I'm in my highest level of creativity in the morning. I love the morning. I get productive work done in the morning. He said instantly he was able to get up in the morning and start having some of the most productive ideas and concepts that he had ever had. And it's because of that methodology. So I've been teaching this all around the world. So I think it's important for whoever's listening to spend some time looking at their outcomes and then figuring out which of their belief systems are tying them to those outcomes, and spending some really quality time on fundamentally shifting those beliefs. Really important stuff. So that's kind of what I wanted to, I guess, leave everybody with as a must learn for their entrepreneurial development.
I love that. Bajo, beliefs, actions, habits, and outcome. And then reverse engineering. I kind of drew some stuff out, and that's a little tip for everyone too. If you've got a notebook without any lines, you can draw pictures and you don't feel like, oh, I'm going outside the lines. So it's like a little sketch pad. That's where I take all my notes. But I really love that. Thank you so much. The Bajo method is something that I'm like, oh, I can do that with anything in my life. I want to look a certain way, or I got to eat certain foods. I got to do certain exercises, right? So, Oscar, I really enjoyed our conversation. Where can our audience go to learn more, to connect with you, and just dive into your world?
Yeah, so they can go to oscar-chavez.com, or they can go to, I have a free information, so templates, worksheets, etc., at 8figures.growthlymarketing.com.
Okay.
So they can read, or on Facebook, I'm Chavez Entrepreneur. Instagram, I'm the Oscar Chavez, or Chavez. Sorry, I'm pronouncing my own name wrong. I've been pulled up on that before. They're like, you're pronouncing your own name wrong. I'm like, I know, I fluctuate between the two. But they're the main ways that people can get a hold of me.
Perfect. Well, thank you once again. Yeah, I heard you say Chavez, and I'm like, wait, I thought it was Chavez, but either way, potato, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you, Oscar. I'll be sure to link all that up in the show notes, so everyone listening, you can head over to the show notes and you'll be able to quickly access all those different links and connect with Oscar. But I really appreciate your time. So much insight. I was trying to write as fast as I could, even though I know I can refer to this later on, once the episode goes live. So thank you once again. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being a listener to the show and for checking out my message. If you've been here for a while, I'm especially grateful for you. But if you're new here, thank you once again for being a listener. Just wanted to let you know, I help people buy, sell, or rent real estate across the nation in the US. I probably could even help you across the world, but it just gets a little more difficult with time zones and setting up times to chat. If you have any questions at all, shoot me a DM on Instagram. My handle is Chris Bello _, or you can also go to my website, chrisbello.com/real estate. Again, that is chrisbello.com/real estate. Happy to help any way that I can. And thank you once again for being a listener.